Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Les Do Books. You can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join the Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm excited because I'm joined today by Annette Mori, author of 15 lesbian novels. Her most recent releases are The Book Witch and Artist Free Zone, both of which are available everywhere. Welcome, Annette.
Thank you for having me.
So you are here to talk about your journey as a reader of lesbian fiction. So where did that begin?
Well, I'm a little bit older, more mature, many years on the planet. So I was first introduced to Lesfic back in the late 80s, back when Nyad Press was really the only option. There wasn't an explosion of books back then. And I also lived in pretty small rural areas, so whenever we had a chance to go into Seattle, or I don't know if it even still exists now, but this big bookstore in Portland, Oregon, we would go travel to Portland on occasion, and Powell's bookstore. And whenever there was a new lesbian book out, it was kind of exciting because there wasn't much out there. I was trying to remember if I could pinpoint what was the first lesbian fiction book I ever read, and I think it was Rena Mae Brown's Ruby Fruit Jungle. It was either that or Curious Wine by Catherine Forrest. It was one of those two, and it might have been close together that I kind of read them both. And honestly, in my area, there were no lesbian book clubs, there was no Facebook, there was none of that where you could get recommendations from anybody. You just kind of had to look at the back of the book or covers, or if you had friends who were readers, they would tell you about books, but that was about it. It was pretty slim pickings.
What was it like finding those books for the first time? Like, what did that do for you, finding them and then reading them?
I distinctly remember Curious Wine. It made such an impact on me because it was such a positive book. And I'm a book nerd, so I read a lot. I read a lot. You know, when I was a kid, I wouldn't go outside and play. I would spend pretty much all my day inside. My mom would, poke at me, get outside, go play with your sisters. And I was like, can't I just read this book? So the first time I read about someone who's like me, it really resonated. And I had heard honestly about The Well of Loneliness, and I've never read that book, and I don't want to read that book because I've heard it was so depressing, and I want books with happy endings, and Curious Wine had a happy ending for the two women, and that was it for me. I just kept searching after that for books that would resonate.
So, what were you reading when you first started writing?
Oh, wow. I started writing not too long ago. So that was really after the explosion of, Amazon Kindle, where you started to get a lot more options out there. And I had honestly really started actively seeking out books from everywhere. And one of the things, of course, I heard about Karen Kalmacher and Susan Maher, and I also, read a lot of Catherine Forrest's books. I even Lynn Golly. And so, what I started looking for, though, was those sort of books that were out of even the mainstream lesbic, because there were many out there. So I actually found the Affinity website and was reading their When Hell Meets Heaven series, which was phenomenal, interesting, different, about, a nun who falls in love with this kind of really sort of badass, almost shady spy type kind of person. Very unusual story. So I really started looking for all of those smaller, unusual stories. And then I was bored. My wife and I were living apart. We are living apart again. It's a real bitch, to be honest. And so I had a whole lot of time. I didn't have a TV. Don't watch TV. I was reading a lot, but even that, I didn't want to spend all my time reading. And so I started reading all these different books, and I thought, I can write a book. It was a lot harder than it looked. And so when I submitted to Affinity, because they were some of these sort of different, out of the norm kind of books, rather than the typical lesbian romance that was really out there more so than any other books. Of course, they said, you have promise, but you have a lot of work to do. So that was where it went. It was as a result of really looking for those out of the norm books that were lesbian themed.
What were some of the out of the norm ones that really stood out for you? Some that I would say like were your favorites, and some that like you still kind of cherish and hang on to.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't like I stalked, but I actually added on my desktop, I remember this distinctly, Fran Hecrate's series, and the Illusionist series. And I remember eagerly awaiting that. And that was one of those sort of series that were a little bit out of the norm. The other one was, it was the Dykes Who Dare Lesbian Adventure Club. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but it's another sort of really obscure, and I would track all their books. I think Susan Maher's series was another one that I pretty much got the whole run of her series, her San Francisco series, the one with the A through Z. Radcliffe's Provincetown series. So many of those I would find somebody I liked, and then I would just read every single book that they ever wrote. But Marianne K. Martin, she was another one that I found early on and read all of her books. Yeah, I think I already mentioned Lynn Golly. And of course, the When Heaven Meets Hell series by J.M. Dragon and Erin O'Reilly. Just different, interesting, out of the norm stuff that wasn't really in that, the same as Georgia Beers or Karen Kalmack or some of those really well-known. I read them too. I read everything. I have thousands of lesbian fiction books.
Well, we all have our addictions, right?
Yes, it truly is an addiction. For a while there, I think I was reading 3 to 4 books a week.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then I got kind of busy, because then I'd start writing, and of course that takes time. So now I read maybe 1 to 2 books a week.
That's still a lot for a lot of people.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
So, how many books a year do you find that you're able to write on average? Or does it kind of depend on the story?
Wow. No, I think it actually depends on my headspace at the time. So I've gone through periods of time where I'm writing consistently 1,000 to 2,000 words a night, which means that pretty much I could write 3 to 4 books a year or more. And then there's other times where crickets, nothing. I just joked recently. I said, I think inspiration has taken a vacation. It's on sabbatical, and she's decided she's not coming back. Because it's a different, I get in a different headspace. Or if there's something that I'm super passionate about, I can whip out a book in a month, at least the first draft.
And are you able to still read in Lesfic while you're writing?
Oh yeah, because, well, I have sort of I'm a bit of OCD, and I have a routine. And so in the mornings, part of my routine is that I work out for an hour in the morning, and that gives me time every single day where I can read. So then when I get into a book, obviously I can't help but continue reading. So then in the evening, I'll usually, if I'm writing at the time and get my 1,000 to 2,000 words in, after that time, then I'll go back to the book.
That's interesting. I was just curious because I've had a few authors on here talk about how they can't read they can't read Lesfic while they're writing because they're too worried about like bleed through or anything like that. So they might read fanfic, or they might read mainstream fiction or something like that.
Oh no, pretty much. I have read other mainstream fiction, but I have to say that probably in the last maybe 3 to 4 years, almost everything, almost 100% of what I've been reading has been Lesfic. And I think it's because there's just so many books out there I want to read and not enough time to read them all. Plus, I want to be supportive of Lesfic because I don't think there's enough support out there, and I want to support my fellow writers and make sure that I'm reading. And I can't review on Amazon anymore, so I do it on Goodreads. And when I really like something, I do my stupid little Lesfic Putty Cat reviews that people seem to enjoy.
Uh-huh.
It started as a joke, and of course, a lot of things start as a joke, and I just take it and run.
I feel like that leads really well into my next question, which is because you are reading so much in the genre, how do you feel about the current state of lesbian fiction, especially if you compare to where it was when you were first finding those books?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say what I enjoy most about the current state of Lesfic is the number of options out there. There's just so much out there to choose from. What's difficult is sometimes to cull through what I think are really good, solid quality novels, and honestly, what's not as great. I think, I've been really honest about my views about not trashing or saying anything negative about any other person's work, because it would just be my opinion, and people feel differently about different books. And who am I to say? I'm a really odd, quirky writer myself, and I know that not everybody will resonate to how my style of writing. So I would never trash another author's books, but I do see that there is, because of the ability to put things on Kindle Unlimited, pretty much everything's out there. There isn't the quality control, if I were being honest. So I need to take the time, and I don't always do this, and then I kick myself when I pick up a book that I have a really hard time finishing. And I always want to finish a book, which is, it's like a rubbernecking or something. I can't help myself. I'm thinking that it's going to get better or something. And there has been only one time when I just simply could not finish a book. But I think I need to do a better job of reading like the first chapter or two. That will tell me if this is really a worthwhile book to spend some time on, because you can't get those 4 or 5, 6 hours of your life back.
No, you can't. Well, so I used to be like that, and I would always finish what I started because it just, I don't know, that was just a part of who I was. Maybe it's because I wasn't allowed to leave the table until dinner was done.
Yeah, right. That's right. Exactly. Italian mother.
Right, like,
oh yeah, totally get it.
So the Lesbian Review has a policy that we don't post negative reviews.
Yeah.
And so it was really freeing to realize that if I know I'm not going to review this book because I'm not enjoying it, because it's not for me, and often it just comes down to like, I'm not enjoying it because it's not for me. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means it's not my jam, and that's okay. I just stop and put it down and move to the next book, and it was a revelation just to know that, hey, I can do this, and it's not wasteful, it's not personal, and it's just so much better than dragging yourself through a book that you don't enjoy.
I know. Gosh, I wish I had that. I think I still have that Catholic guilt or something, because I haven't been, well, I did once, so maybe I'm on that path to Catholic guilt recovery or something, because it is super hard for me to not finish a book, because I feel guilty. I feel like I'm not giving the author a chance, and but
no, message me. I'll coach you through it. I know you can do it. It'll be the best thing you've done for yourself.
Yeah, get those 6 hours back of my life. Exactly.
So, finally, where do you think we're headed as a genre, and what has you excited or encouraged?
Um, well, where here's I'm not sure if this is where we're headed or if this is where I'd like us to be headed. One of the things that has struck me when I first was reading Lesfic, I could not find the only sci-fi, or urban fantasy or anything like that. There wasn't a lot of that out there. Was Daughters of a Coral Dawn, and I remember reading that, and wow, what a great book that was. Where I would like to see Lesfic go, and I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but it's my dream, is to expand beyond the traditional romance lesbian trope, and that we start to see more books that challenge social views, that challenge looking at differences, that challenge the notion that romance is king, queen, and everything in between. More books about not just lesbian characters, bisexual characters, trans characters, questioning characters, asexual characters. I'd like to see more sci-fi. I'd like to see more urban fantasy. I'd like to see more books that are on the odd, unusual end of things. I'd like to see books that challenge politics. Writing and media can have a profound effect. And I think it's our opportunity to put those things out there so that people's views can get challenged a little bit more than what they currently are. That's where I'd like to see it go. And hopefully sneak into mainstream while we're at it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So, Annette, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you?
Oh, I'm everywhere. I have a Twitter account. I have a WordPress blog that I do every Friday. You can follow me. Sometimes I get serious. Most of the time I'm making fun of pretty much everything. Facebook. So I think usually it's Annette Mori 0859 is my Gmail, Twitter, everything else. So just type in Annette Mori. You'll find me.
That is all for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, Annette, and sharing your story.
Thank you, Tara, for having me. Very much appreciate it. It was fun.
So, I'm Tara, and you've been listening to Let's Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on the show to talk about the lesfic you love, the trends that have you interested, or your journey discovering lesbian fiction, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for the Lesbian Talk Show, or visit www.patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive bonus content like podcasts that nobody else gets access to. And you can also join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about any of the books that you're reading and loving. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for the Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, or Spotify.